Hello guys, today we're going to be going over section 5.4 about business management. So let us begin. So 5.4 is basically about location. So now we're going to be discussing factors in deciding the location of a business. So what makes a business decide its location? So firstly, we're going to be discussing costs because costs are a factor. Costs are a determining factor and will largely depend on the type of business being started or relocated. So costs can depend on the land that the business is renting, the land that the business might even be able or willing to buy, the labor, because again, sometimes they need specialized labor, sometimes they need extremely educated labor. This is usually when it's job production, meaning customization, but in other times they may need really unskilled labor that's really cheap. So it really depends on the type of labor they need and the circumstance and what type of business it is. Transport, so basically, whether it's bulk increasing or decreasing, now we're going to be explaining because we have to know what these are. So basically, if the business is bulk increasing, it means the business ends up buying many components and making them something bigger. So for example, they buy many technological components to create a TV, like a television, or to create a car. So they buy these small things, like for the car, they buy the engine, they buy the seats to make the like different seats, they buy leather to, furnish the car. So they buy different stuff to form that car. So when that's the case, when it's bulk increasing, because again, it's increasing because they're turning something small into something big. Thus, the size is increasing. So it's called bulk increasing, okay? And hence, it will make sense for the business to be located next to the market. Okay, so market is where it's selling its televisions or its cars. So basically next to the car seller, its car dealer, next to, let's say, maybe a Walmart that sells televisions. So depends really on the business itself. But basically next to the place where they'll actually be selling the products or the goods themselves. As transporting the finished items would be expensive than bringing them in small components. So basically it will be expensive if they end up actually being located in a far area from the market because transporting something really large takes a lot of space, hence it's going to make transportation more expensive, whereas transporting these small components is relatively cheaper because they're going to fit easier, and transporting them is just less complicated overall. If the business is bulk decreasing, which is kind of the opposite of bulk increasing, basically bulk decreasing is when the business buys large quantities of raw materials and then they turn them into smaller end products. Okay, so basically they break it down. They break whatever the raw material is down. So that's why it makes sense to set up the business next to the raw material, so next to their suppliers, because it's just easier. Because again, when you're transporting something large, the shorter the distance is, the better because it's less costly for the business, right? So we're talking about cost because it's the larger the raw material is, the more costly it is to transport it, right? Because it takes a lot of space, takes a lot of storage. That's why. So yeah. This is it. Now we're going to be talking about competition. So basically, it depends on the competition, on the market, but there's a specific term. This is basically like competition. You should just know it. But I included cannibalistic marketing because it is a term in the syllabus, so you have to know this. So basically, cannibalistic marketing is when a business sets up many branches in the same location. The purpose of that is to eat up the profit of the like other competitors in the same location. That way there is no possible extra trade to be generated, so they stop competitors from opening their own outlets and taking their market share. So basically this is just to prevent other competitors from making any profit. They want to increase their market share and they want to decrease the market share of their um competitors, because once they decrease the market share of the competitors, there's increases, right? So this is cannibalistic marketing. Basically, you just have to know this key term. Also, type of land is another factor because each type of land has different costs and different suitability for a business. So it basically depends on the finances of the business, because each business has different finances, and also on the suitability, because sometimes a business may be like they sell fruits and vegetables. Okay, so they need to be in an area where there's good soil because they're farming in that area. Sometimes it may be a factory, so this factory needs to be in an area which permits a certain amount of pollution, and it's really convenient for the business. And it's also in an area where they have labor, so they have the right labor force. Okay, because not all areas have the right labor force. It really depends. Also the markets, the familiarity with the area. Okay, so this is a quite important. So sometimes when owners are like familiar with the location, they have like a certain advantage, is that they know their suppliers, they know how things work, they know the ideology of the people in that location, what's wanted, what's not wanted. So like this, the like what's demanded basically. They're familiar with the area, they're familiar with the currency, they're familiar with the different types of costs, how expensive things are. However, there's not a disadvantage to that. So again, in IB business management, always remember there's always advantage, always disadvantage. There's always a pro, there's always a con, there's always a opportunity, and there's always a threat, right? So you have to keep in mind the disadvantage is that they may look over certain venues which are more appropriate. And sometimes there are certain locations which are more appropriate for a certain business, because again, each business is different. There's many factors, like we're just going over now, that constitute of what's the ideal business for location for the business. So sometimes they may overlook certain venues that are more appropriate for that certain business, just because they are familiar with the area. So like, oh, okay, so it's easier to really just stay somewhere we're familiar. It's gonna make things faster. So in the short term, okay, being in a familiar area will help you. But again, in the long term, you might struggle, just because some areas were just more appropriate, right? So now we're going to go over the labor pool, which I previously mentioned. So basically, businesses need to take into consideration the type of workers available locally and balance these skills and qualifications needed locally. Okay, so again, sometimes if a business wants to, let's say, do job production, so I'm talking about terms that are in other parts of the syllabus, but you guys really have to get into that. So basically, um, if you want a really highly educated and skilled labor force, there are some areas which are rural, some areas which have a really low um, uh, literacy rate. So it really depends on the area that the business is in. Sometimes it has to really look over its location, or sometimes there may not be a lot of workers that are willing to do manual labor, which are willing to do physical labor, which are willing to be satisfied with these labor wages, just because they're highly educated. Because again, there are so many countries now, because our world is so globalized these days, that lack workers that do manual things, like that they fix air conditioners and whatnot. So that's also like a problem lately, because so many people are educated these days. So it's different, really depends on the labor pool. So unemployment rate needs to be taken into consideration, meaning that more people want a job and are willing to accept lower salaries, thus saving labor costs for the business. Or it might be like the opposite. So it depends on this. So here they're also talking about the state of economy as well. Like sometimes there might be an economic downturn, sometimes the economy might be booming. So it depends. So sometimes if there's a really bad recession, and there's a really high unemployment rate, then people are willing to accept jobs with really low salaries, just because there's no demand for jobs. In other cases, there might be a really high demand for jobs, but so the businesses need to pay more, like need to pay higher salaries. So it really depends. And also teleworking. So some, after COVID especially, there's a lot of teleworking, there's a lot of hybrid work. So it's online. So it really depends on the business. Some things cannot be online because they're manual, they're handmade. Some things can be online. So it really depends on the industry that the business is in. So again, this depends. Then you have infrastructure. So access to services is important to the business, as it may affect welfare and motivation of staff. Suppliers, so the availability and reliability of local suppliers, especially those using the just-in-time system. So JIT system, we discussed this in my previous video, but I will explain if you don't know, if you're not familiar. Basically, just-in-time system is basically that the business makes the products automatically when they are ordered. So when there's demand, so they will automatically be sold once they're produced. They don't keep anything in storage. So yeah. So this depends on their suppliers. If suppliers are reliable, if the suppliers are good, if the suppliers are giving them really good quality, if they're fast, if they're doing well on their end of the deal, right? Then the last thing, which is really important, to have government. So you have laws, so the labor laws, how many hours the workers can work, their salaries, their pensions, whatnot, health laws, safety regulations, rules on advertising and restricting sales. So again, depends, and also taxes. Okay, so all of these things, and tax is very important for a business. A lot of times the business changes its location or changes its headquarters just because of the taxes. This is something that happens really on an everyday basis, right? So now moving on. So the impact of globalization on location. Okay. So we're going to be discussing this now. So we have pull factors. So what are pull factors? Pull factors are they just make it more attractive for a business set up abroad. Okay, so these are external factors, meaning that they're not within the business. So what the business will have is that they're going to have improved communication, so easier to transport products around the world and to communicate with suppliers and customers irrespective of their time zones. Okay, so just they're going to be able to communicate with everyone they need to communicate to in a really, easier way, I guess. This mapping of trade barriers. So this is not something you don't really have to really get into as a business management student. But basically, I'm just going to explain this because if you're an economics student, then you should know this. But basically, trade barriers are just like tariffs, quotas. These are things that just make it harder. They're like laws implemented by the government to make it harder to export. Um, and it's they just like their taxes on exports and whatnot. A deregulation of the world's financial market, so it makes it easier to transfer vast sums of money very easily. So it's easier for startups and businesses to like send money to like pay for stuff. Internet banking pay for their costs. I mean, internet banking made easier to keep up with the company's finances and led to the digitization of the world's financial markets. Made it common for investors to invest abroad. So there's abroad investment now, help build up collaboration and increasing size of multinational companies. So multinational companies, if you don't know what they are, I'm just gonna like give you the acronym. You probably know the acronym. The acronym is MNCs. Basically, multinational companies are companies that are open in more than one country, right? So they have different branches worldwide. It's more than one country, okay? It's more than national. It's international at that point. That's why it's called multinational. So then you have push factors. These like they don't only make it more attractive, they just encourage the business, but they're internal, meaning that there's stuff within the business, right? So the business will have reducing costs. So reducing costs, meaning that they're moving closer to the raw material. So sometimes they may be moving closer to their supplier, because a lot of the times, like a lot of companies around the world, they actually get their raw material from China because it's really cheap, or it's relatively cheaper. So they or like I'm not just talking about China, but I'm talking about China, that a lot of the time that companies get their like raw material from certain countries because it's just cheaper there. So sometimes countries can end up moving closer to the raw material, so they're able to achieve productive economies of scale. So if you don't know what economies of scale are, I think I define economies of scale in every single IB business management video I make. But basically, it's when once production increases, the cost per unit decreases. So I'm going to give you a really small example really quickly. For example, a company produces pencils. Each pencil costs 5 cents to produce. Once the amount of pencils increases to a certain point, each pencil will cost 0.3 cents to make. Okay, so I'm just giving you like an example. Now cheap labor. So cheap labor is like they're able to achieve productive economies of scale. So basically, labor might be cheaper in other countries because their economy is different, their currency is different, whatnot. So labor is cheaper there. More favorable tax regimes. So this is financial economies of scale. Again, the country that they open in may have lower taxes. Their taxes may be more corporate friendly. So it really depends. Then you have increasing market share. So but this has risks. So there is language barriers. Okay, so again, there's always the cultural barriers, historical tensions between countries, different cultural practice. So they may not see eye to eye in certain things. Certain communication may like be altered. They may not completely understand from each other. Lack of knowledge on regional networks, local law and politics, time differences and challenges of working across many time zones. Okay, so these are all things that can get in the way of globalization, I guess, opening in more than one country. Advantages that the business may be the first one entering the market. Okay, so they may be maybe the first one, especially if it's like a food chain that's really like important and popular in one country, it opens another country, then and they may be really popular in this new country if they like serve something or there's a concept that isn't done in that new country, right? Using extension strategy. So this is something that is studied in section 4.5, sorry, 4.5. But basically, there's a life cycle for the product, and once this product reaches saturation, meaning it reached its ultimate amount of popularity and won't reach any more popularity. What can happen is that if the business opens in a new country or in a new location, I guess, is that it's gonna have a new life cycle. So it's gonna begin becoming popular all over again in that new area, just because it opened in that new location, because people weren't familiar with it. But again, always keep in mind that this is something in section 4.5 that you have to study really well, the life cycle, right? And then you have using defensive strategies. Business may decide to open overseas not because they need to, but they don't want their competitors to do it first, right? So they want to be the first in the market. That's a really, really, really good advantage. They have something called the first mover advantage. I'm going to write it down. First mover advantage, right? Especially like we mentioned, if there's something that is lacking in the market, something that's non-existent in the market, and they open there, then that's a really, 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 really big opportunity for the business. Reasoning me that growth and expansion are key drivers for a business, and fear that rivals might steal land, which can push them to open overseas, right? So now we're going to be defining outsourcing or subcontracting. Basically, the same word, same meaning. So if they ask you outsourcing, that means subcontracting. If they ask you subcontracting, that means outsourcing. So don't get confused in your exams, right? The practice of employing another business to perform peripheral activities that enables the business to focus on its core activities. These peripheral activities are activities that are like these day-to-day activities that aren't, the main activities that the business focuses on, right? So the business ends up hiring another business to do these certain day-to-day activities. So outsourcing can help a business cut costs and hence like reduce their prices, hence having competitive advantage. So once they cut their costs, they're able to cut their prices. And once they cut their prices, then they'll get more customers because it's cheaper and customers also want to save money. Common outsource activities are marketing. Okay, so they hire an advertising agency. That's like usually like above the line promotion. So I'm just gonna like okay. In production, so licensing a producer to make part of the product. So yeah, HR employing an agency to headhunt staff, so they don't have to do that. They don't have to spend their resources doing that. They can just hire an agency to take care of all of that. And finance, hiring accountants to run external audits. Okay. So the advantages of that, it can lead to reduced costs. So sometimes it costs less to just hire an agency to handle everything instead of handling everything by the business handling everything by itself. It enables the business to focus on core activities. It can transfer expertise, okay, because again, sometimes the marketing agency can be better at the business than the business and marketing for them just because marketing is their thing. Marketing is what they do. Okay, the employees working in the marketing agency literally have masters and degrees in marketing, so sometimes it's better, okay, especially like let's say this is like a company full of engineers, okay, so I think if they give it to someone that has a advertising agency, then it might be better. It can lead to capacity utilization. Delivery time could be reduced, right, because that the focus of the outsourced company will just be focused on that one thing. Disadvantages, the business could be too dependent on the suppliers, okay, and sometimes that could be a bad thing. Sometimes the supplier won't be good on having their end of the deal done. They might be slow, they might have difficulties, okay. The business has less control over the final product, so sometimes it can have to be done, like for example, especially if that's within production, then the supplier may give them bad quality, something might go wrong, the products might arrive dismantled, they might arrive in bad quality, in bad shape, so you never know. And dilution of the brand, customers realizing the product of the brand is not made by the brand, right? So also dilution of the brand, right? So yes, now we have to define offshoring. So offshoring is outsourcing outside the home country. This is something a lot of them do, a lot of companies do. Advantage and disadvantage, other than the one of outsourcing, since it's a type. Okay, so always keep in mind that outsourcing um is what offshoring is. So offshoring is a type of outsourcing, right? So I think I wrote something on. Okay, so basically keep in mind that all the disadvantages and advantages of outsourcing are the ones of offshoring, since offshoring is a type of outsourcing. Okay, so these are just ones specifically for offshoring, right? So we have disadvantage. There may be difference in culture between the companies, both national and corporate culture. Okay, this can lead to like miscommunication. Communication can be difficult, okay, because of language, etc. Disadvantage issues of quality and ethics. insourcing, and especially if they don't know like the brand image that the brand is trying to keep up and show to the world and whatnot in order to like enhance this brand loyalty. Insourcing, the practice of performing the peripheral activities within the company. So everything's done within the companies. It can start to insource instead of outsource to regain full control, reduce cost of taxes, labor, and transportation. So it depends on the cost part. It really depends on the scenario. Reshoring is basically practice of bringing back business functions to home country. So this is opposite of offshoring. Okay. And that's it, guys, for section 5.4. I think it's a really cute one. It's a nice one. I don't think they're gonna ask you like many questions about this, but I think you never know what really comes. I think the definitions might come, and you might even have a 10 marker asking you what the business should do. So you should always know your definitions, you should always know your advantages, disadvantages here. But again, it's always about content and context. If you have any questions, please comment down below. Please subscribe and like so I can continue making these videos. And my email is down below if you want any private tutoring or any help or any questions that you don't want to comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye. I hope you have a good day. Bye.